Joseph Stalin, one of the most notorious and ruthless dictators of the 20th century, ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist. He transformed Russia into a superpower and built a military and ideological barrier that polarized the world. Yosef Vissarionovich Djugashvili was born on December 18, 1878, in Gori, Georgia. He would become known to the world as Joseph Stalin. Stalin studied at the Orthodox Spiritual Seminary in Tiflis as a trainee priest. In 1898, Stalin was introduced to the ideas of Karl Marx when he joined an illegal political group called the Mesame Darsi, or Third Group. A year later, Joseph left the seminary school under a cloud but remained in Tiflis to support the revolutionary movement against Tsar Nicholas II. Stalin was arrested multiple times between 1902 and 1913 and was exiled to Siberia on several occasions. He continued to work as a revolutionary while in exile. It was here in exile that he adopted the name Stalin, which means steel in Russian. 1903 saw the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party split into two factions, the Bolsheviks, headed by Lenin, and the Mensheviks, headed by Julius Martov. Stalin aligned himself with Vladimir Lenin. Stalin married Ekaterina Svanidze at St. David's Church in Tiflis in 1906. He fathered a son, Yakov Yosifovich Djugashvili. Yakov was taken prisoner by the Germans in the Second World War and died at the Sachsenhausen camp on the 14th of April, 1943. In September 1911, Joseph Stalin was co-opted into the Bolshevik Committee by Lenin and Gregory Zinoviev. After the Russian Revolution in 1917 and the subsequent civil war between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, Stalin emerged as a key leader within the Communist Party. In 1919, Stalin would marry Nadezhda Alliluyeva. They had two children, Vasily, born 1921, and Svetlana, born 1926. Svetlana was to defect to the US in 1967. On the evening of 8th of November 1932, at banquet to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the October Revolution, Stalin and Nadezhda argued. The following morning, servants found Nadia dead. She had shot herself with a pistol. In 1922, Stalin was nominated as the first Secretary General of the Communist Party during the 11th Party Congress. He gained significant influence by appointing members under his command. Following Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin had succeeded in outmaneuvering his rival, Leon Trotsky, to become the dictatorial leader of the Soviet Union. Under Stalin's rule, the Soviet Union underwent rapid industrialization and collectivization. The five-year plans aimed to transform the agrarian society into an industrial superpower. However, the plans were often difficult to fulfill, and failure to meet the plan resulted in imprisonment or execution. These plans caused widespread famine and millions of deaths. Stalin's reign was also marked by extreme political repression. The Great Purge of the 1930s saw millions of perceived enemies of the state executed or sent to labor camps. This era of terror solidified Stalin's control, but is one of the worst offenses against human rights in the 20th century. With war brewing in Europe and the fact that Stalin had purged Russia of many of its military leaders, Stalin decided to sign a non-aggression pact with Germany in August 1939. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact would allow Russia and Germany to carve up Eastern Europe between them. In June 1941, Hitler broke the pact and invaded Russia, codenamed Operation Barbarossa. By October 1941, advancing German troops had occupied Ukraine, Belarusia, and the Baltic. Leningrad was under siege. Stalin was prepared to sacrifice millions of Russians to achieve victory over the Nazis. With tide of the war turning in the Allies' favor, Stalin met with Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt at the Tehran Conference in 1943 and discussed a second front against Germany. They agreed. May 2, 1945, Berlin fell into Russian control. Helmut Weidling, the commander of the Berlin Defense Forces, surrendered. The Battle of Berlin was over. The Yalta Conference was held from the 4th to the 11th of February 1945 between President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and General Secretary Joseph Stalin to shape a post-war peace. The Declaration of Liberated Europe was a promise that allowed the people of Europe to create democratic institutions of their own choice. Despite these assurances, Russia had already made plans to install communist puppet governments in occupied Eastern European countries as a buffer from the West. Winston Churchill described the Soviet expansion as an Iron Curtain. On 29 August 1949, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb. The Cold War had begun, and Russia had evolved into superpower. Joseph Stalin died on March 5, 1953, at his Kuntsevo Dachau of a stroke. He was 74 years old. His death was mourned by millions in the Soviet Union.